Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar that we have today. Azul and SHI, 6 steps for managing Oracle Java licensing and processing changes. Just give me a couple of minutes. I think people are still joining, so we'll probably start in a minute or so. So hang in there. Those just joining, welcome to the webinar today. We're just waiting for a few more people to join, so just hang in there, another 30 seconds or so, and then we'll start. Okay. Let's make a start, guys. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us today. Welcome to the webinar with Azul and SHI on 6 steps for managing Oracle Java licensing and pricing changes. Joining me today is Jeff. Jeff's Global ITAM Service Delivery and Product Management Lead at SHI. My name's Simon Taylor. I'm the Senior Vice President of Global Partner Alliances at Azul, but I'm also the subject matter expert on SAM and ITAM as well. We'll do some brief intros in a minute, but I just wanted to welcome everybody, give a bit of background, and also state that today we're really having a conversation around some of the challenges that we've seen just in the general software asset management ITAM space around Oracle licensing of Java and what it really means to help sort of navigate people through that. If you like a more practical blueprint type discussion around where this can go. So welcome, Jeff. I'm going to allow you to introduce yourself a little bit, Jeff, if that's okay.
That'd be great, Simon. I'm gonna do it through a little bit of my journey here, if you don't mind, Simon, because we're gonna dive into the specifics of Java, but I think I've got a little bit of a story that will resonate with the group, and talk a little bit about the importance of software and IT asset management and how critical that is to managing software, especially a complex publisher like Oracle. And I learned this lesson a long time ago, way before I ever got into the ITAM business. So just for everybody, I'm a lifelong IT practitioner. I've been doing it since I graduated college, started as a developer, and have worked on the infrastructure side, service management, the business side of the house. And I progressed into several CIO roles, but the pinnacle of it was in September of 2015. I became the first ever global CIO of about a $2 billion software company that operated in 78 countries. And I had a few priorities, right? Security, do no harm, centralize a decentralized organization, and drive innovation and efficiency, nimbleness into the overall IT ecosystem. What I didn't realize when I took that job is there was an active software audit in place. I found out about this audit and got first awareness in December of 2015. And by that point in time, the damage was already done. Oracle knew more about my Oracle environment than I did or anybody in my organization did. And in April of 2016, dropped a $52 million out of compliance letter on my lap. And as you can imagine, the very, very next day, on April 17th, my entire focus shifted from all of those priorities to managing the Oracle audit and defending against it. And it was basically a full-time job for about the next 3 months. I soon after that became an ITAM practitioner and now have the honor of leading the delivery organization at SHI that helps customers with their SAM and ITAM needs. Thanks, Simon.
Thanks, Jeff. I love that story because it's very good for people that are listening in that, you've got firsthand experience of being on both sides of the conversation. One,
correct,
in other words, advising and assisting, and two, being on the receiving end of what amounts to a fairly significant compliance issue. Now, conversely, from my perspective, I've actually spent most of my career working for software vendors, but on the side of working with partners, and that's why I do what I do, which is to run channel for a lot of the organizations I've worked for, but also a lot in the compliance arena as well. So I started life in governance and compliance, ran Commvault's information management business for 9 years, then ran Proofpoint's business in governance for 2 years, and then spent pretty much everything since then, which has been the last 12 years or so, working with partners in the ITAM SAM space, particularly around issues around licensing management, licensing compliance. Because in this world, as you'll find today, when we talk about this, it's a collaboration. You know, anybody that's stuck in this sort of like, what do I do with these types of licensing issues? You either have a memory muscle internally that you can leverage around how to do this, or you need help, and you need help from people that, like SHI, that have the experience to deal with the license management, and also the vendors as well that have good alternatives and good visibility of things that you can do in this case in and around Oracle Java licensing. So to that point, I've written a book with us at Azure called the ITAM Java Licensing Playbook. We'll reference this a little bit more today. You can download this for free. It's available to you. And it really follows a very simple process, which is good discovery, good understanding of validation, critical understanding around what's important to you in your organization, figuring out what options are, understanding the cost of change, which is where workshops come in, and then finally doing some form of migration. So you'll see as we go through this, we're sort of leveraging this process, but we work very well with partners like SHI to help manage this. And in some cases, even if you just want independent advice in the first few stages, you can leverage SHI to do that as well. So we're going to be talking very much about this. So before I jump into a little bit more on the ITAM side, let's have a quick history lesson on Java, because there's probably many people joining that just really don't understand what the Java implication is today. So I have the luxury of being a programmer originally, would you believe it? Got some gray hair to explain that. But that was 30 years ago. So Java is actually almost 30 years old at the moment. It's in fact, I think the 30-year birthday is next year. It used to be free. So it's open source. Everybody used to use it. No problem at all. But Oracle acquired the Java licensing. And from 2010 onwards, steadily, certainly over the last 5 to 7 years, Oracle has been, not weaponizing, it's the wrong word, they have been charging more and more and more for support, and more importantly, the specific updates on certain types of Java versions. Obviously, those are called JDKs, different versions of those Java development kits. But you know, the latest version today is Java 23. But of course, really old versions of Java are 4, 5, 6, 7. For example, there's a lot of legacy applications on 6 and 7 that currently Oracle doesn't support. But at the same time, obviously things have changed a lot in that licensing world. And that culminated in 2023 with Oracle changing the licensing rules on Java from infrastructure, so desktop and core processor, to employee, when everybody went nuts over that. And the reason why is because now Oracle's famous sort of strategy around audit, which Jeff was explaining in his scenario, they don't need to do so much of that anymore. They can just point to your website, look at the number of employees you have. If they have proof of download or proof of use, they can just give you a bill. And that's really what a lot's going on right now, and it's sort of freaking people out quite a bit. So we're going to talk a little bit about this. Other things I wanted to be aware of, and maybe a few people who've joined webinars will have seen these slides before, but this particular slide is about the type of customer that we're dealing with, and it sort of frames the whole conversation that Jeff and I are going to be having moving forward. So we find that customers in these scenarios fall into one of three categories. The first one is you're already paying Oracle for Java, but maybe you're out of compliance and you have a huge issue, and Jeff will speak to that in a second. That'd be number one scenario. And of course, the challenge is how do you maintain your original compliance, or if you're not, how do you negotiate to not spend as much money? More importantly, though, the big area is because Java used to be free, there's a lot of people using Java, downloading stuff from Oracle. Oracle's tried to audit them. They've told them that's not going to happen. And they're not paying Oracle, but they've been getting away with it. And of course, those are the customers that are really now very concerned because they can be given a bill with very minimal amount of audit, right? And the third scenario is those that have no idea of the Java dependencies that sit in their organization, and therefore uncovering that, working with some sort of specialism to understand where that detail sits is really crucial. Jeff, do you have any thoughts on this at all? I'm sure you've seen these types of customers as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I see these things happening quite a bit, and you know there are a ton of misconceptions, Simons, around audits just in general, related to how customers react to that. So maybe we could talk about that for a moment.
Yeah.
From an SHI perspective, we interact with a large number of customers that are dealing with audits or worried about audits, and a lot of misconceptions out there that we see consistently. Customers believe that they're going to get advance notice, or even real clarity around a pending audit. Sometimes they don't use the word audit at all. It can be called something very, very different than that, but it is actually an audit. And companies of all sizes and shapes get audited, not just large ones. Sometimes actually the big jumbo ones are avoided because there's so much revenue at risk if they were to move away to another product. So we see a lot more of the strategic enterprise size customers getting audited. If you're here today, right, free is not always free, right? We'll talk about that some more. And then these audits are, from my view, a real revenue play, or a pure revenue play, right? It's not a time to have open dialogue with the publishers. We would actually advise a different approach than open dialogue. And then, preventing non-compliance, it's really a widespread effort, right? It is not just the responsibility of IT. And in the event of an audit, right, it normally is all hands on deck to defend against it.
Okay. So it's quite interesting you say that, Jeff, because when you start thinking about how do people take this concept of audit and then sort of their concern around, how to move things forward, I think the bigger issue is what are the options, right? So
right.
Let's talk about this a little bit, because I think this will help frame the rest of the conversation. So, from my perspective with Azul, and we obviously provide an alternative to Oracle Java. We're probably the leading one outside of Oracle themselves. You can ignore it. You can try and just try and ignore emails from Oracle. You can try and ignore the outreaches and the phone calls and things like that. And that is a strategy. But of course, eventually things try to catch up to you, right? So I think that's something that people see a lot. You can try and negotiate, but I think this is where, Jeff, is going to be really important to understand your experience, because I think negotiating with Oracle is futile. It's like the Borg from Star Trek, right? So negotiation is futile. But
it depends on the leverage, right? Depends on where you are.
Yeah. So negotiation, you need to have a plan, right? But usually a plan comes from good understanding of data and knowledge. And if you don't have a plan, then you're sort of like fairly open to sort of a fair amount of risk. A lot of people, though, I've just been seeing recently, have just been handing over data to Oracle and sort of surrendering. And don't get me wrong, I mean, that's part of the approach of Oracle. Everybody sort of knows that that's what happens. But to your point, it isn't an open dialogue, right? So the more data you give, the more you're putting yourself in a difficult situation. Now, specific to Java, when license managers tend to reach out to DevOps and find out, okay, what's going on with Java, one of the strategies is you can try and remove Java. Now, let's just clear up a few things. Java's been around for 30 years. It's very hard to get rid of Java. And a reason why is because there are a lot of dependent applications that run it. Nearly all core business applications and infrastructure of any certain size and processing capability, for instance, in the banking world, insurance, life sciences, even e-commerce. If you're using a framework technology that is basically supporting a website with dynamic search or general AI, for example, you're probably using the stack of applications that's underpinned by Java. So it's really hard to remove it, right? So it's a very difficult thing to do, and if you do, then you find yourselves in massive amounts of additional cost on redesigning and redeveloping those applications in something like Python, for example. You can try and upgrade to freer versions of Java from older versions that are paid and that put you in a vulnerable compliance situation, or you can try and switch. And of course, we'll talk a little bit more about that as you think about what the options are. But Jeff, any other thoughts on this as we move forward?
Yeah, I think the ignore, negotiate, surrender part of it is a really important thing. And we're going to talk about how important data is to not having to be in that position.
Excellent. Okay, so of course, the webinar was entitled about 6 steps. So we have got 6 steps. So it is contextual. Luckily, everybody can stand easy there. So the first one is, as it relates to dealing with the consequences and what it means to understand the Oracle outreach. The first step is to have a strategy on how you manage your risk in relation to the Oracle outreach. Don't respond to Oracle until you've got the facts, for example. And we see this quite a lot. And if I move to your discussion points, Jeff, in this area, let's just talk about what that means, because I think that's the first thing that people, when they realize they've got a problem, is when Oracle's coming up the door, they maybe didn't pay Oracle for Java use, or they didn't know what the risk was, and everyone's panicking, right? So,
Boy, yeah, Simon, it's such a common problem, and being in control of an audit situation is so important. To your point, you've got to manage your response appropriately, and unfortunately, so many companies are unable to do that. Instead, you said risk just a little while ago, Simon, that they're sitting on and managing unknown risk, and that's really due to a common problem, which is limited ITAM and SAM capability in the industry, and that creates all kinds of financial risk for a company during an audit. I generally see an overall lack of understanding of what really makes up a mature SAM or ITAM capability. If you talk about tooling, it's very common for companies to say, "Hey, I've got tooling," but they could still lack a clear quality view of their entire IT estate, their entire software estate, which is so very, very important. And SAM expertise is really, really hard to find in the industry. I'm a great example of a senior stakeholder that was focused on other things like security, business transformation. That's where a lot of the funding goes. It can be very, very difficult to gain support and funding for ITAM and SAM. And this very, very last one is really, really interesting because it's very common that once an audit is resolved, however it's resolved, surrender, negotiation, however it is, it's very common and easy to think, well, that's over, when in reality, a company could be significantly out of compliance very, very quickly again and right back to managing unknown risk. With Java as an example, one licensable event slipping into your environment, and bam, you're right back into your starting position again.
That's actually a good point, because that's why people need to have the good combination of experience between the vendor and an independent SAM ITAM advisor to manage what everybody's calling, I think, Oracle defense, right? Or strategies to make sure that licensing doesn't creep in where it shouldn't do. And I think, that's where a combination of technology and service helps, right?
Yeah, the best defense is to proactively managing your compliance and your optimization on an ongoing basis. And even if you've removed a product like Java from your environment, you have to manage that on an ongoing basis to make sure it stays that way. That's the best defense against an audit.
And that's the same for any type of licensing, right? As well.
Absolutely. Any publisher, any license.
Correct. Okay, so let's move on to like the discovery phase, because I think, as we said early on, if you're going to have a negotiation or you're going to try and do anything, it's important to do it based on fact, right? Understand where risk is, understand where those tool sets arrive. And of course, SHI, you have your own tool set. There's other tools out there as well. But we think of this is where step 2, step 3, and step 4 come in. So it's very much around identifying and understanding where your Java is. And there's a different level we'll talk about in step 4 in a second, but the initial sweep of looking at install of Java is one thing, right? That gives you an idea of where Java is, but also then looking at versions, where it's installed, desktop, servers, things like that. So good SAM ITAM tools really help in that area, for example, and build that inventory, understand the full scope. And the second area is just expand a little bit more on that, which is to understand now where are your risk. You will know straight away whether that's licensable installs that you've already covered within a contract framework or not. So very quickly you can make a determination of, am I covered? Is there existing third-party dependencies on other licensing that would enable me to have coverage in that area? And then the fourth step, which I find super critical right now, and it's the one that's the biggest one that's missed actually, is understanding where your critical applications are. In the world that we live in, and certainly in dealing with this from a Java perspective, understanding critical Java workloads and how that relates to key business applications raises the priority around what you need to do with your license. So, for example, in the ITAM world, it's very easy to say, oh, I could just get rid of that license, or I don't need it. But you don't know until you really understand how that reverse engineers up to a particular business application, whether that could be the most critical application in your business, and you didn't really understand that because the workload installation path doesn't give you that visibility. So that experience, that knowledge, and how you build that intelligent inventory is pretty critical to really understanding how to manage this situation. Would you agree, Jeff?
Yeah, yeah. When I really didn't understand what good ITAM and SAM looked like, I thought it was counting, right? And you just articulated a very, very different use case and value than just counting what you've got. It's very, very different than that.
So what, in your view, then, what would a mature practice look like? I know I'm leading a bit of the slide content here, but this is sort of where we're going a little bit, which is it's the
Yeah,
maturity, isn't it? Yeah.
absolutely. And the whole thing that we were really getting at on that prior slide is data, right? And good inventory management. And that's kind of like a baseline to being able to have a mature ITAM best practice, that complete and accurate IT estate. That data is required to provide the needed level of visibility and understanding, that leads to really, really good decision making from quality data and the insights that data provides. And the benefit is really broad, right? It isn't very, very specific to just the use case of compliance. That's a great one, and it focuses on the cost savings and the cost avoidance. But there's a positive, broad impact on things like infosec, finance, operations, procurement, to name a few. Because if you do ITAM right, you're able to contribute directly towards the goals and objectives of broader stakeholders, as well as strategically contribute towards your organizational's digital transformation. So you do it well, the benefits are really, really widespread, and that helps you build your ROI.
Right, that's good. So really great to understand now, and particularly on that digital transformation element. I think people that resonate with more strategic elements of the decision making and thinking.
Yeah,
Just
I think,
yeah,
Simon, about the Java discussion. How do you know what to do if you don't know what you have? But if you're on a cloud journey, right? Great ITAM data influences that significantly, just as an example.
yeah, you're right. And actually, it's funny enough, I was just about to go there as well, because that SAM ITAM convergence into FinOps and the whole idea where you've got hybrid environments and therefore hybrid licensing, and you want to be able to reuse the licensing and understand where the workload is. That's just not very traditional license discovery. It's a much broader exercise, but
Mhm.
obviously gives you more intelligence to manage that. So I totally agree. Um,
Absolutely.
Well, we're in the home straight a little bit on a few slides here, and I just wanted to signpost to people online. If you want to have any questions, we're going to leave a few minutes at the end for those, but please drop them in the chat, and we'll answer them at the end. I mean, you might have some burning questions that you want to bring up. Obviously, just let us know, and we'll chat those through at the end. So if we get to a good mature SAM ITAM discovery and set of recommendations, and let's just say that recommendation is, hey, we don't need to go negotiate with Oracle. I mean, good examples of that, for example, are if your legacy applications run on 6 and 7, and you've traditionally been paying Oracle, Oracle actually don't support Java 6 and 7. So you're paying Oracle for something that actually knowingly they actually don't support. So that's usually a very gating factor to say, okay, let me go and find somebody that does support that. And actually, Azul's these are the only organization in the industry that does support Java 6 and 7, which are sort of older, more financial service or infrastructure-based solutions. But there's a very good example. So that discovery will start to flesh things like that out, all right, which is sort of very important. But once you've done that, I think it's really important, certainly in the decision making, and I think this comes to working effectively with a vendor and a SAM ITAM practitioner, is to look at the cost and risk of change, right? And that really, there's two things that are very important there. One of them is, do you have the capability internally to move and switch? Because Java's so old, and also you may or may not realize the full dependency. You might not have a large amount of skill set. So we can help you solve that problem pretty quickly, and so can SHI, because they have skills as well. But also then choosing the right vendor for the right reasons is quite key, as well. So license savings being one of them, of course, and we'll talk about that. We save a lot of money versus Oracle, but also things like security readiness, understanding where your security patches come from. I'm going to talk about this in the next slide a little bit here, because when you look for an alternative, these are the top 6 things that you need to consider, right? The first one is, can I save money and how much, right? So that's just direct comparison to the licensing framework for Oracle. So once you know how much license you have, to Jeff's point, you can then say, okay, what's the alternative if I'm going to get with paid support? And you know, for example, on Azure, we're normally somewhere between 65 and 85% typically. The big one for me though is how you get security updates. So the common misconception in the Java world is that, you know, all the updates are the same, and they're not actually. In the open source community, if you were going with a free version of licensing out there, you would get quarterly updates from the open source community. But those are big updates. They're actually called PSUs, patch set updates. I won't go into the detail, but they include everything, all the changes that anybody is making in Java in that particular release, in that particular version. Problem is, relatively speaking, they do get tested, but not to a great degree. So unless the customers test them themselves, what often happens is they fix some things and they introduce other things. And that's also where zero-day exploits come from in the Java world. So there was one scenario a few years ago where on, I think it was Java 15, for example, there was an update that was installed and it actually broke the majority of the runtime Java virtual machine environments. And as a result, it created a zero-day exploit, which all those updates are published globally, so bad actors can look at those and within 48 hours know how to exploit someone's environment. It created a major impact, and that remained unpatched for over 30 days. So anybody that downloaded that patch and installed it and didn't bother testing it, actually at the same time created a huge vulnerability that went on for an extended period of time. Now, CPUs, which are critical patch updates, which only Oracle and Azure provide, they instantly solve that problem. So if you have critical applications, which is what I was mentioning earlier, you want to go with someone that's going to give you those CPUs, because you might have a regulatory mandate in your industry that says that you have to patch sensitive applications, for instance, those that contain personal information or healthcare information, and you have to do it very quickly, because if you have a breach, you have to notify, and nobody wants that exposure. So the list goes on here, but security expertise, critical response support, things like that, and also an understanding of how to navigate some regulatory compliance issues, like the Critical Infrastructure Act in North America, like DORA in Europe, for example. These are all things that come from a trusted sort of vendor like Azure and working with SHI. Last but one slide here, just talking a little bit about what the summary sort of selection is on this. So as we start to sort of like finish up here, this is the magic formula, really. In other words, the 6-step process is the things you think about, but what does it mean to actually make a decision and what you need to do? So if you have some of these skills internally, great, right? And if you have a good Java team, you know what to select. If you have a good SAM ITAM function, fine. But the majority of the time, we find organizations don't have these skill sets, right? So this is what this webinar is about today, is to tell you that there's people that will help. We will help you understand how to manage the risk around the license, how to pitch or understand the right Java solution for your needs, and then take you from A to B and understand that cost and risk can change. Jeff, is there anything you want to add on this slide at all?
Yeah, I think you've got to look at all 3 of these together, and you can apply these use cases and things we've talked about to all publishers and other software use cases as well, Simon.
Cool. I know you wanted to finish up a little bit just on the ITAM services of SHI.
Yeah, for those who don't know, ITAM by SHI, we help hundreds of customers a year with their SAM and ITAM needs. We've got a very, very flexible, comprehensive set of capabilities, lots of expertise, but probably the most important thing here is when it comes to Oracle specifically, we are the only service provider in the world that is also an Oracle verified discovery and inventory tool partner, right? So we can help more holistically than just your software vendors can.
Thanks, Jeff. So we're almost at time. Obviously, I'm going to do a plug for the book that we've written as well that you can download again. But let's see if there's any questions. Stephanie, I know you're still on the line as a moderator here, but is there any questions popped up in the chat?
We did have one person type in. They asked, during the creation of an Oracle Java inventory, what data collection and analysis methods yield the most effective results in identifying critical applications and dependencies?
Okay, let me speak a little bit to the Azul experience here, and I'll see if Jeff wants to add anything. So there's a lot of tools out there that do basic install path analysis, and that install path analysis, if you've ever seen the CSV files that come back from that, it's like they're as long as your arm, right? And they contain a whole bunch of different data, but they don't really necessarily give you the insights. So you need to run them through something we call like impact analysis tool sets. So I know SHI have a tool set in this area. We also provide and support our partners with an application that actually does that analysis for you. And there's no charge. That's just it's part of our process to help you understand critical workload. But the key thing is to sort of understand how the installs of Java roll up to the critical applications that are being run in your organization, so you can go back to those business owners. So it's a particular step. It involves classification, categorization tool set, if that makes sense. Jeff, is there something you're familiar with? Because I know that's part of your overall process as well, right?
Yeah. In addition to app categorization, right, there's a relationship to how well a customer's CMDB is established. Good discovery and inventory tools are going to be able to give you usage patterns and information. That's all of that information is going to drive into this. And this is where the art starts to apply, and where you need experienced folks that have gone through this journey and done the analysis on this data through all those lenses, right? It's not something that just a tool is going to be able to do for you on your own.
Got it. Thanks, Jeff. I think I can see there's another question here, Stephanie, as well, which is, when managing Oracle Java licensing risks, in what scenarios do alternative JDK vendors offer continuous security updates, PSUs versus CPUs, and license support savings become more advantageous? Right, so that's really everywhere. So I mean, obviously I've been using Java myself for 30 years, so there isn't really a scenario if you've got a Java dependent critical application infrastructure that you would not benefit from CPUs, because CPUs close the window and the gap between vulnerability and remediation, right? Because if you can patch a vulnerable application quickly and without introducing more risk, which is what PSUs do, because there's a lot more change going on. CPUs are very specific. They're solving critical issues to do with Java immediately, right? And there's only two vendors that do that, Oracle and Azul. That means that you can go home and safe in the knowledge that those applications are managed from a maximum perspective from a security point of view. And Azul hasn't, none of our customers have had a single issue as it relates to Java because of that, because we provide those updates immediately versus having to wait, and then you've got the exploit scenario. So that's the security bit. The support savings, though, let me dispel a big myth here, because migrating to an alternative can be very, very quick, right? I think there's a lot of FUD in the market right now talking about, oh, it's going to take months or years. Not at all. In fact, we've got a very large financial organization globally, and we have many, many customers at Azul, usually large multinational corporations. But this particular one had 300,000 Java desktops with installed, and that was actually using Oracle, and they migrated all of them in a weekend. So of course, there is more complexity depending on the number of applications and the distributions and the versions, which is what we discovered during the whole 6-step process. But it can be very, very quick, and also then you can immediately save the licensing and negate any concerns you have on paying Oracle. Okay. Any other questions? I've got one for you, Jeff, I think. Assuming we have the right partnerships with Azul and SHI, what type of data comes out of the discovery phase that helps us make the right decisions? Is that something you want to take, Jeff?
I think the most important thing we get is we know where everything is, right? And Simon, that's a huge benefit and a huge problem for customers, right? So one of the great things about the discovery and inventory tools that we've built that Oracle's verified is we're going to be able to find every single place that there's Oracle Java in your environment, what it's running on, and how it's being leveraged, right? Great foundational place for you to start to do your analysis on it for whatever outcome you're looking for out of that data. So if you've got an Oracle environment, right, you've got to partner with somebody that's got a verified Oracle tool, so you know that you're getting a complete view of that entire Oracle estate.
Thanks, Jeff. Well, thanks, everyone. I think we're at time. So I just wanted to thank Jeff so much for your participation today.
Yes,
and,
pleasure.
hopefully you found this very useful. If anybody wants to follow up, obviously you can reach us individually as organizations. Happy to share this presentation as well. I think it will be on our site for anybody to review very shortly as well. So thanks again, and look forward to seeing you on the next webinar.
Bye, everybody.